welcome to the DGD podcast. As always, Robert Reynolds, Kobe Pierce, Juan Daniels, introducing Travis Davidson to the show from the JP and Trav show. Today's a little bit different, guys. We are welcoming the Oklahoma Sooners to the SEC. With that being said, hope everyone is having a great day. Travis, how's it going, my man?
Man, it's going great. Going great. Just excited. Very excited that we have some clarity finally. I was always one that believed we were going to be there in 2024 regardless, but it's nice that everybody else can know it as well.
Absolutely. We had Dr. Juan on the show, but apparently there has been a outfit change, and you ruined my joke, Juan. I was gonna go through Scrubs referencing like "fly high like an eagle," but can't do it now. So sorry. Kobe, how are you, sir?
Doing great.
Look at that, my man.
Just ready to talk Oklahoma football.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, but welcome to the time between seasons, if you will. Don't want to give it the old word, but you get what I mean. With that being said, though, let's talk about this. Let's go and jump straight into it. As everyone in the brigade gets in and gets situated, what does the transition from the Big 12 to the SEC look like for Oklahoma? So I'm going to pose this question to Travis, and I'm going to let him pontificate upon this. What does it mean from a fan base perspective? What does it mean for Oklahoma Sooner fans?
Excitement, really. It means opportunity. It gives them an opportunity to honestly shut some people up. Some of the, we'll say, less successful schools, obviously Georgia coming off, multiple national championships, a different animal altogether, of course. But when you look at like the Arkansas and Missouris and Mississippi States of the world and things like that, the ones that have always said that they would go undefeated in the Big 12 and that OU would be a 2-win team if they had to go through the SEC grind like they did, it's an opportunity to be like, all right, we've been dominant for the better part of a century now. So let's go ahead and back it down that we'd just be, an 8 or 9 loss team in the SEC. But yeah, a lot of excitement, a lot of opportunity to visit those places. That's what I'm most excited about. I want to visit all of the SEC towns. There's not a bad one in the bunch as far as we're concerned. I'd rather go to all of them than Lubbock. You know what I mean?
I think you bring up an interesting point about and the poll brings up an interesting point too. I don't think that anybody has ever won the SEC yet as like an expansion team. Like Missouri hasn't. They've played an SEC championship, but they haven't won one yet. Texas A&M hadn't even played for an SEC championship. Even going back to older teams, it'll be interesting to see Texas and Oklahoma being more traditionally good over the past, like you said, 30 years. Can one of those two teams, and which one kind of comes in, kind of goes off our poll, comes in, like handles their schedule well, has kind of things fall their way, and, see a team like Oklahoma or Texas win an SEC championship possibly. It just hasn't happened yet. Eventually, statistically, of course, it, will happen.
Yeah, you would think, especially like you said, having those expansion teams in there, we hear this conversation a lot, right? OU, man, A&M and Missouri, see how they fared. Colorado, see how they fared by leaving the Big 12. Nebraska, see how they fared. Well, outside of a good stretch in the 90s and part of the 80s as Nebraska had, really the Osborne era, like none of those schools hold a candle to us when it comes to, they're closer to holding the candle to Texas, which Texas is trying to hold the candle to us when you think just historically, right? So I think that's what's interesting is people want to say, like, look at the reasoning, right? Why do you think Colorado fell off whenever they went out? Well, because, they lost a lot of recruiting ties and their leadership wasn't what Oklahoma has with Joe Castiglione, right? So when you look at that, you look at Nebraska. Well, they lost a lot of their recruiting ties, and Scott Frost was more interested in partying with the co-eds than actually, going out and recruiting and doing this, that, and the other. Like, A&M's always been a mess. The boosters run the program, and Missouri's never done anything outside of a very small stretch with Chase Daniel. So it's interesting because the reasoning people don't want to cite the reason to why those schools fell off. OU is still local to the DFW area. It's a 2-hour drive. It's one of the hottest recruiting hotbeds in the nation. We get a lot of our players from there. We recruit nationally. I think we were probably a top 5 program when you look at schools that took some of the best players out of Florida this year. So we've got players coming from Florida, Colorado. We got in the Northeast, everything like that. Now we're not as talent rich as say like a Georgia is or a Florida or anything like that, like just local wise. But being so close, I mean, 2 hours away from the Dallas Metro, and now we've got the SEC badge on our jerseys. I mean, that's an advantage that Texas A&M has had, and I mean they've used it big time in their recruiting. And maybe it wasn't the deciding factor for everybody that went to A&M, but it was certainly a plus. They were the one Texas school that you played in the SEC. You think back to like a Leon O'Neal, which I know a lot of people like to pick on him. Leon Slow Neal is a lot of people call him, but that was a guy that said, "I'm better than the Big 12. I want to go play in the SEC," and he ended up at A&M. So I think with that, it's hard to compare OU and Texas to Colorado, Nebraska, A&M, Missouri, anything like that, because A&M and Missouri had pretty quick success. Missouri goes to the SEC championship game, right? Johnny Football beats Bama, right? I mean, wins the Heisman. Like they had some of their best years over the last 20 years probably were right when they joined the SEC. So I find that kind of interesting.
Well, if you really look at it, I mean, they don't have the rich tradition that Oklahoma has. I mean, you sit there and you think of Missouri, you're kind of hard pressed to find out who special was at Missouri. Same thing with Texas A&M. You get your Johnny Football, but that's it. But you think about Oklahoma, and you go back to Barry Switzer, and you go back to Jamel Holloway, and all of these great people that that went throughout the program. Here's why I think that Oklahoma is going to be successful is number one, their head coach, Brent Venables. So he, was in the ACC. He's faced the SEC. He's faced the South Carolinas. He's played Georgia. He's played Alabama in these national championships. So he knows what it takes to play and or compete against these. So his tradition, his he's going to bring in those recruits to compete. And I think that you guys are going to be successful. I saw a poll that said, will Oklahoma have an opportunity to play in an SEC championship within 5 years? I say yes. Especially going on which side you take. Alabama, Georgia, and you put those guys on one side and you guys have a side to yourself. I think you guys run absolutely through them like hot butter, a hot knife through butter. So I do think that you guys are going to be successful. Said it, the SEC badge. Now everybody's going to look at Oklahoma to say, you know what? Now we're in the SEC, so let's go in there and compete. And they're going to be able to get what they are looking for.
So I want to pose a question, or actually answer a question here. Chad Littlefield in the chat was talking about. He's curious to hear what some of the SEC guys think about Oklahoma coming to the SEC. And I think that answer is subjective, depending on which fan base you're part of. Because, in my opinion, I think you take a Georgia or an Alabama, and from my perspective, and I'm going to speak for myself, okay, I mean, that's going to be nice, but, bring it on. You know what I mean? I think that's how I feel. But when you start looking at other teams like Ole Miss or, Arkansas, Missouri, I think Missouri and A&M are probably. I just don't know if they're ready for that, because it feels like A&M kind of left to get away, but now right now you got the Texas and Oklahoma coming back, and it's like, damn, I just can't get away. It's all subjective, I would assume. Kobe, what do y'all think? I mean, obviously I'm here for it because of Travis brought up the matchups, right? Going to Norman, going to Austin, like that's going to be extremely fun. You know what I mean? In my opinion, I think it's going to be really fun. What do y'all have to say about that?
Yeah, I think for me, if you're a mid-level SEC school, you realize now that two of the best teams in the Big 12 are coming. and you're already having to deal with the best teams in the SEC. And now you're also going to have to deal possibly with these guys, maybe not every year, but depending on how the schedule looks, every other year. I mean, you're South Carolina or Tennessee, one of those two schools, and Tennessee had a good year this year, but you're looking at like Tennessee has to play Georgia every year and Alabama every year. Like you throw in Oklahoma to that every other year, and Texas occasionally as well. I mean, you're talking about some games that, yes, they're going to be really good, but a lot of times, like really good success from these schools, like to kind of start build that momentum, come off of like favorable scheduling years. I mean, you can't run the gauntlet year in and year out and expect you to go from 8-4 to 11-1 because you just keep running into that same juggernaut somewhere on your schedule that's not placed properly. I mean, look at South Carolina a couple of years ago. They had the hardest schedule in the country. They had to play us. It was the year they had to play Bama across in the West. They had to play Clemson when they had Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you sprinkling Oklahoma on top of that. I mean, what are you, as a South Carolina fan, what are you looking at? Like, hopefully we don't get beat by 45 in all 4 games.
One chuckles because it's true.
And then now you sprinkle in Tennessee on top of that for them, which I know they beat them this year, but like, you're just looking at the schedule and going, we could lose 5 games, and it's not even, March.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, you bring up the recruiting, right, and like being able to bring the athletes. I mean, we finished 4th in recruiting this year in the 247 composite. Texas finished 3rd, so it's not like, oh, we're bringing a bunch of Big 12 athletes to the SEC. Like we're loading up. We had the number 9 class last year, the number 4 class this year, and 2024. I imagine we'll probably be top 5 again. Obviously, we're waiting for that to pop right now for us, and you guys are destroying it on the trail, looking to retain that number 1 class in 2024. But I mean, Oklahoma, like with the coaches like Valai, like tons of relationships, obviously being at Bama, tons of relationships in the SEC. You look at, I mean, Brent Venables, Todd Bates used to get dudes from IMG annually to come to Clemson. You look at guys like that. Brandon Hall won Big 12 Recruiter of the Year this year. Like we got dogs that are used to recruiting that area in that Southeast that, I mean, with DeMarco Murray pretty much having his pick of a lot of the running backs. I mean, having DeMarco Murray, we've got about five 4-star running backs, 5 like top 25 running backs that we lead for right now. And he's going to have his pick of the litter. So it's like we're bringing not only the Oklahoma tradition, but Brent Venables, to your point, he knows what it takes. And he's getting those athletes in the door. So while we may not have, the 9 5-stars or whatever Alabama ended up with, I mean, 3 5-stars is a good start when you're coming off a 6 and 7 season. So, having the athletes is definitely going to make an insane impact because you can just look at the rosters, right? I mean, you just look and be like, good Lord, these are grown men versus these guys. So really excited. Like I said, I think we're recruiting that way. But you're right. I mean, adding OU to the schedule any given year, I mean, for the better part of the century, that's a loss for that team, right? And it's trying to get your foothold in the SEC to try and pull yourself up to that next tier, right? Try and go on a run like LSU does every once in a while, try and go on a run like Florida used to, just try and put together one run where everything aligns appropriately for you to just have maybe 1 or 2 of those people on the schedule. And all you got to do is win one of them. And maybe you get a national championship appearance. Maybe you get a playoff appearance with the playoff expanding, and you just give yourself a chance. But to your point, adding OU, and now that Texas is continuing to recruit really well in the trenches now, they weren't for the longest time. Adding both of those, you're right. You look at the schedule and you're like, dude, I got OU, Texas, Bama, Georgia all on my schedule. Like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. You also have to look to, when you look again, Oklahoma tradition, I mean, they were there for, a couple of times. You've got, Jalen Hurts, going in there. Unfortunately, they ran into an LSU juggernaut that I don't think anybody on the planet could have beaten that year. And, you also have, an opportunity with Kyler Murray. So, and then, of course, Baker Mayfield. So you guys have gone through a stretch of having some excellent teams that were just on the cusp of getting to that next level. I believe, and this is just me, my personal opinion, that going into the SEC now, having, getting those additional recruits, who's to say that you guys are just not going to top it off now? I mean, you guys have a great shot, a great chance, and even better, it's better that you're in the SEC because you're going to be battle tested, number one. And then there's nobody else that can say, oh, well, they went through a weak Big 12, schedule. And then, of course, they're going to be in they didn't play anybody. Well, you guys are going to have said that you've played pretty much the best of the best. And then when you get to that national championship, if that day comes, you guys are going to be battle tested. And I think that that's something positive that you guys have that's in your corner coming to the SEC. And you make the SEC prettier. I'm sorry, but Missouri didn't. You don't look at Missouri and think, oh, well, that's great, woohoo! No, but
definitely didn't flash, right? Definitely didn't flash when they came in.
Right.
I mean, you look at A&M as being the key driver there when that 2012, right? But yeah, Missouri from that standpoint was like, why are they here?
Yeah.
You're here to compete with Vanderbilt. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. And that's one thing, like talking about schedule. For the longest time, we always heard from the Arkansas of the world and from Missouris of the world and everything like, oh, just the SEC grind. You don't get it, man. I'm like, okay, part of that is a bit overblown because, like, you look at Alabama every year. They always get, like, a bye before the Iron Bowl and then, like, Mercer before LSU or something like that. Like, their two biggest games, you have, like, a little bit of – either a legit buy or a manufactured buy on the schedule.
Yeah.
So
be careful what you say now. I heard TCU coach say something about that too before that championship.
Yeah, well, hey, but it's also one of those things. But it's interesting because, like, you bring up battle tested. Colin Cowherd said that as well. He's like, man, Georgia was battle tested, and TCU, they got there through the Big 12. I'm like, look. It wasn't Georgia being battle tested that won them that game. They're bigger, faster, stronger, more talented, better coached. Like, you got NFL players all over the field. And yeah, TCU's got a couple, but like at a certain point, like you have to have the Jimmies and Joes. Like you have to have the dogs, no pun intended, to be able to get that done. So I'm looking forward to, I think they get rid of, we can talk about scheduling. I think they get rid of that late November cupcake that people tend to put on the schedule. I think you go to a 9-game conference schedule, but I'm hoping that they want to, like, the less annual rivals, the better, in my opinion, because I want to travel to more places. Mathematically, the more annual rivals you have, the less places you'll get to go see. Because if you're playing the same 3 teams every year, then you'll get to go see 6 places one year, maybe 6 places the next, whatever, right? It's like if you just have one rival and you go with a 1-8 or something like that, then that's 8 places you're getting to see, and you can change that. So I don't know. And by the way, I see the Go Utes in there, and after what they did to USC, us OU fans have a special place in our heart for the Utes. So,
we know. I think we know why. Listen, you're going to be. You might be the only one in this that has that special place because Utah is trash. By the way,
they're the worst.
They couldn't even beat Florida for us.
Yeah. Speaking of,
we asked them to do one thing.
Yeah, you had.
Yeah, like y'all needed it. Like y'all needed it. Calm down. Like y'all needed it.
No. Travis, it's this way, right? We wanted Utah to beat Florida because it's Florida. Right, we just wanted to beat them because we hate the Gators here.
I'm sorry. Your undefeated back-to-back national championship season didn't go perfect for you.
Well, listen, we did our part. Right?
My heart bleeds for you.
Hey, Travis, when you get over here, there are going to be some teams that you're going to hate with a passion, just kind of like you guys.
I hate teams with a passion too.
Yeah.
If Utah played Texas and Texas beat them, and I won the national championship for the second year in a row, I'd be like, I don't care. I hate Texas aplenty. I'm like, but I think at this point y'all are nitpicking. I think y'all getting a little spoiled.
Nah.
Florida and Auburn are just trash. They're just absolute garbage. And Utah.
This podcast will cheer against Florida and Auburn any turn.
Hell, Auburn can play ECPI and we'll pull for ECPI. I'm like, I see your commercials. Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just the way that is here, man. But no, you were talking about this, Travis, and I want to kind of expand this a little bit. You had mentioned that less traditional rivalry games, right? You would prefer that. Now, I think a lot of talk since the official, joining of Texas and Oklahoma in 24 has been around this potential scheduling model, right? And a lot of people have said, well, you're looking at possibly 3 annual, right, permanent games and then 6 round robin. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this has been a big problem for me with our current divisions. When you look at, like, for instance, Georgia has yet to go to College Station since they joined in 2012, and we're expected to go in 24.
It's ridiculous.
So ultimately, I think getting away with divisions has got to be a priority. You just need to get away with it. I'm okay with the 3 and 6 model because while you look at from a Georgia perspective, we're looking at it as, well, we get Auburn and we get Florida, and then you can throw a third in there. We don't give a shit. Like probably South Carolina. Who cares? And you, because SEC is built on this tradition, and I'm okay with that, especially if I can take and beat the fuck out of Auburn and Florida every year. Just those 2, I'm fine with. When you look at Oklahoma and Texas coming in, and you bring back the old rivalries with A&M, Missouri, Arkansas, I want to get your thoughts on that, right? Like, the question would be, what 3, if it does go that way, what 3 permanent games would you want to see, and what do you expect them to be? So it's a 2-parter.
Yeah, so I get the argument for having annual rivals, right? Like, but part of the problem is, like, I would, if somebody just said, hey, like, what's Georgia's rivalry game? I would just say Florida. That's a famous rivalry, Georgia, Florida. I know y'all feel differently, but like, I wouldn't put Auburn in there. I wouldn't put South Carolina in there. I guess people could say Bama, but it's really just because you guys have just been good recently together. So like, when you look at specific, like Georgia Tech or something like that, I think it'd be tough to do it for every school because Texas's rivals. You could argue that Arkansas is Texas's rival, dating back to the Southwestern Conference days. Obviously, OU is. Obviously, Texas A&M is. They used to play on Thanksgiving Day. So there's Texas with 3 bona fide rivals. And then you've got like a Vanderbilt. Who are their rivals? Like Missouri. Who are their rivals? Like Arkansas. Who are their rivals? Like, at some point, we're going to have to manufacture some rivalries, which I don't know. It seems like I would rather be able to travel to more places. I'd rather be able to have more people come visit us, host different fan bases. I'd rather do all kinds of that as opposed to manufacture rivalries just for the sake of scheduling, just to take care of, like, to make sure Alabama, Tennessee, and Alabama, Auburn, and it's like, because like I said, some schools just have more rivals. It is what it is. But if I got to pick like the 3 like rivals to say, like, I would obviously have Texas. I personally would have Texas A&M, and then I would probably have, like, it would then be solely based on recruiting. Do I find it more valuable to have Missouri as that 3rd school to really build a wall, kind of just, we'll take everything west recruiting wise? Or do I want Florida so we can continue to establish a presence in the state of Florida? It's really that, because I mean, if you have Texas and Texas A&M, you have an opportunity to continue, to build, get those roots even deeper in the state of Texas, which is our lifeblood. And then, like I said, you either build a wall with Missouri, or you try and cultivate more recruiting ground in Florida. I think Arkansas is an interesting answer because of the geographic rival. It's kind of like Oklahoma State. Like Oklahoma State is not a rival outside of just like geography. Like not like the football teams, like I think it's like 90-19 or something like that, or 92-19. Like it's one of the most lopsided like rivalries, a lopsided series in the sports, history. So with that, it's like, do you put Arkansas because they're a geographical type situation going on, and you might need, another rivalry for Arkansas? Like I don't know. I would rather, like I said, cut down on the annual rivals. Like just give us Texas. Like just give us Texas and then fill it with 8 other schools, because I don't really care to manufacture rivalries for 12 schools in the SEC that don't have 3 rivals.
I think with that though, I think what was interesting, like when we take LSU Florida, right? That was a kind of a manufactured rivalry, and honestly, when both teams are good, it actually can produce impactful, meaningful games. We all know the shoe, right? Marco Wilson throwing that shoe farther than Anthony Richardson could accurately. Just looking at that right there, like there's been some interesting manufactured rivalries, but I get your point, right? You want to see more, and I think we're going to get that, right? I think, looking at the proposed model that you're hearing around, social media and stuff, right? Like Georgia going to Texas and Oklahoma once every other year. Obviously within 4 years you're playing twice, but home and home. For me, I think that's just I'm trying to keep it simple, right? Like I want to go, and I'm sure Georgia fans want to go to these schools and see that, right? And go to go to College Station finally, and not wait hell 12, 14 years in between, right, visits. But you talk about that right there. I think that makes sense. But ultimately, I think what they're going to do is probably need to keep the 3, and then, like I said, the 6, you're still getting that blend. You know what I mean? Like you keep those permanent games, because listen, a lot of those games, like especially Georgia, Florida, right? Like that's going to make a lot of money, and you know how this is. It's money driven, right? TV deals and all that stuff. Which actually, I saw a question from Chad earlier, or a comment talking about no noon or 11 a.m. kickoffs. I'm assuming Central Time. And I think Juan Kobe, there's another thing when we're talking TV. At least they don't have to worry about Gary Danielson when they join.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, leaving Gus and Joel, that's going to be tough, because Gus Johnson has some incredible calls. I think we all remember. Most famously for us was when he gave Hollywood Brown kind of let it be known, brought it, out to the world of Hollywood Brown's coming out party against Oklahoma State that day. But, I mean, to your point, like Gunny was talking about 11 a.m., I am in the minority here, and I totally get that. I don't mind 11 a.m. kicks, because I tend to, talk a wee bit of trash on social media from time to time. And it's a lot easier to do that, or know when you can do that, if you played early. Yeah. I'd rather get our game out of the way, know if I have a win in my pocket or if I have a loss, before I watch the rest of the day's games. Because it's a bummer when you watch a game and you're like, oh man, a team ahead of us lost. Like, here we go. All we got to do is, and then you go out and lose, and you're like, well, it doesn't even matter. Like, and also I do radio pregame and postgame for KREF, the home of Sooner fans here in Oklahoma. So I'm on for 2 hours pregame and 2 hours postgame. Well, I'd rather get that over with, because, man, especially even the night games, I know everybody wants the night games, and I totally get that. I'll take them at home all day. But, man, you're doing radio until, 1 in the morning sometimes, and you're like, man, what are we doing here? So, selfishly, I do like the 11 a.m. I like the 11 a.m. on the road, because the crowds aren't quite as hostile at 11 a.m. I like that, and I'm able to get up, get out. But yeah, and to your point, I think any athlete in their 4 years should have played and visited every school.
That's a great point. And I was going to bring that up, because in my 4 years, I never had an opportunity to go to LSU. And I don't know if you did, Kobe, but I heard LSU night games are the most electric, the loudest, the craziest. Right. And I never went to Arkansas. to play at Arkansas. And
that's insane to me. That's insane to me.
Yeah, and so those are things that I think from for a recruit or even for a player, they should have the opportunity to say that they've played in every single stadium.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you've heard about that. You played in their conference and you didn't get to play them. Like how that seems so silly to me. And it's like you should the student athletes should have that opportunity to gain that perspective, both hosting every team and playing at every team. If they're there for 4 years, there's no reason mathematically why they can't get that done. So do that. I mean, I went down. So one of my buddies, Jamar Kane, who was coach at Oklahoma, and then when Lincoln Riley left, he ended up being defensive line coach at LSU. During our bye week, I went down to Baton Rouge to hang out with him and go to the Ole Miss LSU game, and I had an absolute blast. And I was like, I just can't imagine being in their conference and never playing there. That seems so backwards to me.
I mean, the last time? I mean, Juan, when did you? Hell, it wasn't that 1980s or anything like that, right? Like,
I was back in the early 30s, where there wasn't even really any.
When A&M was relevant, right? The last time they were legitimately relevant.
We just had a big old bench, and everybody squeezed onto the little bench and watched the game and stuff like that. And it wasn't on TV. We had like little flip charts where you just sit there and flip it, and then you can see the game going.
Yeah, see, I see PG showing here. He says he is excited to go to Death Valley. There's a lot of SEC environments that are hard to replicate and outproduce. Like if you look at, obviously, I think you look at Death Valley at night, right? That is iconic. You look at Bryant-Denny Stadium is another one. I think it's intimidating to go play, right? And Texas is about to find out. But when you have the opportunity to, from a Sooner or a Bulldog fan, right? When you can go to, like, a Sooner fan can go to Athens, right, and experience Athens, or, like a Dog fan can go to Norman, right, and not be the Rose Bowl, right? To actually go to Norman. I think there's so much like enthusiasm for all parties involved. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So I'm ecstatic just because, you start to see because we're going to go obviously ESPN. So I would assume you're going to see like more primetime games, right? Like if say Oklahoma joins the SEC and they're ranked and everything like this, and say Georgia, Oklahoma come in, and whether it be at Athens or Norman, there's a good chance that game might be a primetime game. Now,
I would argue that even if OU is not ranked highly, I still think it would, because those are brands. You have to think, obviously, geographically, they cater to completely different geographical markets. Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, just look at the Twitter following of these schools. Like, look at, that's always a fun way to determine how many people might be tuning into a football game. Like, when you have that many people that are at least on social media following, they're watching the games. So when you look at those bigger brands, I don't care. Like, Mississippi State might be on just a heater, right? They caught a favorable schedule. Maybe they got a quarterback that's playing out of their mind or something like that. And maybe they're playing, Florida or something like that. Like, OU Georgia, no matter where they're ranked, is going to get the TV.
Just branding.
Yeah, here's the thing. They're going to, I think, put OU and Texas in that primetime slot a lot, simply because it's so new, and you're getting a lot of these matchups in home environments for the first time in a long time, maybe ever. And for example, this year, if you ask any OU fan what road game they're most excited about, a lot of them are going to say BYU. Now, that's, pales in comparison to, a lot of the schools that you guys will be visiting. But we want to go because, it's in Provo, gorgeous mountains. It's just a very cool part of the country. But we're not going because of we really want to see BYU Stadium or anything like that. We're having to find silver linings that make our road trips really good. If we were going, I would argue that there are probably 10 SEC schools, maybe more, that if we went to them next season, it would immediately become our premier away game. Immediately. Probably 10 of them.
I mean, because you could say Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is in a situation just literally just throwing out random names. I mean, outside the obvious, right? Outside the obvious.
You got Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Florida, Ole Miss. I think Arkansas would be a big game. A&M, South Carolina would probably be the most. Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, probably anyone outside of Mississippi State or
Vanderbilt.
But
people, I mean, if you look at that, it's like we're excited to go to Provo to be in the mountains, and it's gorgeous, and this, that, and the other.
But you're going to Nashville.
Yeah, Vanderbilt. I'm like, hey, look, let's go to Nashville and hang out. Like,
but also
with hopefully a relatively not very stressful game.
And at some point, though, like I could see them being most excited about it because I don't know, like if y'all play BYU, I don't pay that much attention to Big 12 scheduling, like how it goes. But if you play BYU at BYU this year, there's no way you could play at BYU again next year, right?
Well, yeah, because they're in the big. They'll be in the Big 12.
But like in a normal year, like. I know y'all play like whatever. Y'all don't always play
typically
the same set teams.
So in the past, we only had 10 teams in the Big 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we played a 9-game schedule. So everybody played everybody every single year, and you just flip-flopped back and forth into just a home and away. So scheduling was super easy because your whole conference schedule, we played – OSU, Kansas, and Baylor at home this year. Oh, next year we're just going to be those games on the road. Like you knew that ahead. You knew it years ahead of time because it would just go back and forth. So, like now, like it was so much different than the SEC. Like you guys got to figure out, like, well, who are we going to play? It's kind of like the NFL. Like, what are they going to plug in, and where are we going to play?
Because, I mean, you basically do the same thing. If you play an East team, you're home and away the same. You always play Auburn because that's always one of our 2 cross rivals. And then depending on if we play Auburn at home or away, typically the other SEC West team is the opposite. So, like, if you play Auburn at home, the other West team is normally away.
Okay. The previous Big 12 scheduling was very easy. You played everybody, and then you played everybody again, just in the different place you played them last year.
So we have our first Pat fact. Juan Daniels was the original Big 12. If you don't know, you don't know. But now you know.
Well,
boom, right there. Look at the Big 12 right there.
I wanted to tell Travis, like I'd love to go to Norman just so I could see them run out with my first mode of transportation. That y'all come.
I did hear it asked.
Yep, there it is. I remember riding that to school, man.
Robbing the gang. They're back.
I did hear it asked a bit earlier, asking what the heck a Sooner was. Of course, the Sooner during the land run, the Sooner was the faction of folks that left early because, when the gun went off, that was supposed to, signal that you could go get your land in the land run. So boomers were the people, in the original term boomers, not the current one. But boomers were the people who actually waited for the boom of the gun. And the Sooners were the ones that left a little early, which in true Sooner fashion, leaving the Big 12 early before the grant of rights is up. I mean, we're just on brand through and through, committed.
Juan, do you want to host our history lesson real fast? What was it like when the Sooners were a real thing?
It was crazy. I mean, you had to be fast. Like you had to be fast. You had to run. It was great.
Colonel Juan has spoken.
But I tell you, man, like you just talked about, just to see different traditions. Like who doesn't want to go and see, the tradition that you guys have at Norman? Same thing with, when you go to Auburn. To see that eagle fly around the stadium is electrifying. You have the Bengal Tiger. I don't think he's there anymore.
Mike, you talk about Mike the Tiger?
Yeah, Mike the Tiger.
I mean,
you'd walk out there and you'd have to walk by this big old tiger. And so there's so many cool traditions to speak to your point, Travis, that each of these players, each of these fans should have an opportunity to go and experience those, just to say that they did it.
It's what the sport's all about.
College ball.
And you'll really get to have something like unbelievably bad happen to you at Auburn at some point.
Now y'all will understand. Y'all will understand
SEC tradition. So sooner or later, y'all roll in top 5. Auburn will be awful, and
we're ready for it.
But
that's what college football is all about.
Happens.
It's about pageantry. It's about experiences. It's about celebrating weird traditions. I know I make fun of A&M as much as anybody else does, but we can't talk about being wildly fanatic and all that, but then, say their traditions are weird, which they are.
They are.
Like I said, I dunk on them. I dunk on them constantly. But at the same time, it's like, hey, it's their traditions. Like, they've got 100,000 people bought into whatever they're doing. So, it would be better for them if they won occasionally. But if that team really gets rolling and gets that fan base behind them, that's a formidable potential foe. But to your point, like LSU, I was Jamar's wife, we were meeting up before the game to do some tailgate and whatnot. And she's like, yeah, we set up basically right behind the Tiger. And I was like, I thought the Tiger was the name of a building or something like that. How they have the bookstore or something, they call it, a different name than just the Union or the bookstore or whatever. Right. So I was like, I walked onto campus and I was like, it's a damn tiger, like a real live tiger in the middle of their campus. I'm like, okay. So I sat there and watched the tiger for a little bit. And then I went over to tailgate. I was like, she literally just said it so casually. Yeah, we're just right next to the tiger. I was like, oh, okay. It's interesting. So, but yeah, stuff like that. Those are experiences I wouldn't have going to, other spots. But even there's, if you're a fun person, I've always said this, when people are like, oh, this person's always bored. I'm like, well, then that person is a boring person. In 2023, it's impossible to be bored. There's podcasts, there's games, there's the internet in general. There's whatever you need. It's impossible to just be flat out bored.
Unless you're a chess fan.
And hey, they have fun doing it. So with that, it's the SEC, it scratches a different itch of college football fandom. But I'm a person that honestly enjoyed Ames, Iowa, because it was cool to be able to walk across that big bridge. Their stadium is kind of weird. They've got these grassy knolls, if you will, that people are just picnicking on in the middle of the football game. It's fascinating. And if you love college football, you can find, different, basically outside of Lubbock, you can find different facets of really any stadium that you can really enjoy. It's just the SEC turns up the volume on the specific one that deals with passion, volume, literally, and just the pageantry of the sport.
So I got a question for you. You talk about, the rivalries and things like that. And if I'm not mistaken, Bedlam is not going to happen anymore once y'all join. What are your thoughts on that? I thought it was interesting, but y'all have absolutely dominated that whole rivalry. And it's to the point where it's Georgia Tech, but worse. Is it a rivalry at that point? Is that the case?
If I were OSU, I'd want to keep it more simply because of ticket sales. That's a massive loss for them. With a lot of the Big 12, actually, OU was always the game they packed out, the highest ticket sales ever. It's the biggest brand coming to town. So I don't really mind losing it. I think that at least the way it's been painted and the way that I'm going to continue to paint it, OSU kind of took their ball and went home and then blamed us for leaving, even though there's out of conference games. Clemson and South Carolina find a way to play. Like Georgia and Georgia Tech find a way to play. Like all these schools find ways to play each other, with other schedules. But they're just mad that we left and didn't take them with, because we are the ones that brought them into the Big Eight, right? So like it was the Big Seven, and then we brought OSU into the Big Eight to make the Big Eight, right? So we have brought them with in the past, and I think they're painting the picture of you owed it to this state, to take us with you. I'm like, look, we're supposed to look out for the University of Oklahoma and the University of Oklahoma alone. State makes plenty of money off of it. Like so I'm not too worried about the rivalry going away. I think it's a great I think it's the best thing ever to happen to OSU football. The best thing ever to happen. Because if they play their cards right, they can be the best team in the Big 12. Now, what does that get you, being the best team in a Big 12 without OU or Texas? I don't know. But it's something. And right now they are fumbling the bag, because I would put 5 teams above them, 6 teams above them right now.
I agree with you, though, about at some point, I think it's better for them and it's better for the state of Oklahoma if you start looking at other states besides Alabama, which has Alabama and Auburn both in the SEC. You look at Georgia, you have Georgia and Georgia Tech, ACC, SEC. You have Florida. For a while, it was Florida State in the ACC, Florida in the SEC, and Miami was in the Big East. And at those times, all those schools can have success without necessarily having to compete with each other, like internally in the state. Where like Oklahoma right now, y'all were playing conference games against Oklahoma State. So now, like you're saying, if Oklahoma's having a lot of success in the SEC, Oklahoma State may be having a lot of success in the Big 12. You just never know if a year lines up. I mean, y'all could both be top 10 teams and not having to like constantly knock each other off that rocker necessarily.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I think Gundy's got 1 Big 12 title though. Like, and
y'all ran shit for so long. I mean, it makes sense, right?
But the problem is, and that's what's so interesting about the Big 12 is OSU. When you look at the teams over the last 15 years nationally that have the most wins, OSU's up there. But they just, they call it the poke choke for a reason. It's just they seem to be a yard short here, a yard short there. Like Baylor has won the Big 12. Kansas State has won the Big 12 since. Like when you go back in the years that OU didn't win it, theoretically, when you look at win totals, it should have been Oklahoma State. But for whatever reason, just couldn't get it done. So it'll be interesting. I think they're handling the portal very poorly. They're recruiting very poorly. They're ranked in like the 40s recruiting. Like I think they are. I think they've blown the opportunity. I think when OU and Texas left, it was their next step was to finally rise to the occasion and be the Oklahoma of the Big 12, like when we were reeling off 4 or 5 straight Big 12 titles. Like, and they've just blown the opportunity. I don't think Gundy makes it much longer.
Yeah, no, the mullet himself, I think it's been going around for a hot minute too. I saw, where was it? Hold on, let me scroll back up here. Chad Littlefield said Lubbock is trash that threw batteries and tortillas. It could be mustard bottles and golf balls. Ask Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, as long as they're throwing them at Lane and not me, that's fine.
No, I mean, you gotta be careful with them Voltars in Knoxville, boy. They're a different breed, and I'm the inbreed.
I'll be in the press. I'm in the press box during games, so I will be safe.
So you think?
But pregame and postgame, it's on like Donkey Kong. I'm ready for it.
Well, you better watch out. You start hearing Rocky Top playing through there, man. I'll tell you. Yeah, that's a rough.
We've shut up that stadium before.
That is so annoying too. Sandstorm is so well. The chicken, it's the rooster, dude. That rooster is so fucking annoying. Just wait till y'all go to South Carolina. Like, get to hear chicken and hotter than all hell too.
But the 2001 Space Odyssey is nice though, man. It'll get you hyped up.
Beamer's a friend of the program, so we've got a lot of people.
Not a friend of Kirby though.
That went with him. No. went with him to Oklahoma and whatnot. So we've got a little bit of ties, but we've shut down Rocky Top before with that crazy comeback and kind of Baker Mayfield's coming out party. There's still guys from that team that are like, there's nothing like shutting up 100,000 fans that thought they were back. Like that was their like Josh Dobbs year, right? Like that's what they thought their comeback was, like Tennessee's rise back to power, and then it ended up being the start of our playoff run and the emergence of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I was about to say. Well, speaking of Baker Mayfield, Kobe, you have a personal experience with Oklahoma. Do you want to explain yourself there? I mean, I figured it's perfect timing.
Yeah, I was not a lot to explain. It's quick, short, simple, sweet. I was on the team in 2017 when we played the Rose Bowl. So I still that year, in my opinion, if y'all end up winning that game, I think you beat Alabama in the national championship. Like I think that year Oklahoma was the best team out of the four in the playoffs. I just think I hate to use the word unlucky because I know how well we played in the second half, but I mean it definitely, if that overtime goes your way kind of thing.
That was one of those.
Wasn't Baker sick that game?
Sickish. Okay. Not sick enough really to matter that much, I feel. We got away from what was working in the first half. The squib kick, is infamous around here. There's no doubt about that. But there's no reason to be up by that much with that offense. I mean, when you look back at that offense from that game, every single one of the 11 were in the NFL. Like you had your backup quarterback on that team was the number 1 overall pick and Heisman winner. Like, I mean, you had an eventual Joe Moore, a winning line. I mean, you had crazy receivers, NFL tight ends, like everything on that team. But I think that's what we see. Like when people ask the question, like Lincoln Riley's current team, like USC, like, yeah, they can score on anybody, but they can't stop anybody. I think that 2017 is the perfect example of what it looks like when a team tries to have a great offense, but ignores the defense. Because that's the most glaring example. That 2017 Oklahoma offense is one of the best offenses in college football history, and you couldn't get it done because you only cared about that side of the ball.
And it's important. I mean, I think that whole, it's not just Lincoln Riley. I think it is that style of play across the nation. I think that's why Lane Kiffin won't ever win anything of consequence. So I think eventually, I know Tennessee had a good year this year, but I mean, I just worry about them down the stretch maintaining that. Anytime you sit there and you go, we're going to run all this speed on offense, but we're going to ask our defense to play 80, 85, 90, 100 snaps a game. Like, that's just not maintainable. It may be great for a few games here and there, but game, 9, when your guys have played 850 defensive snaps in the past 8 weeks and the other team's only played, 550, it's just one of those things. It was like, I looked it up, even Oklahoma last year, y'all running 76 offensive plays a game, and your defense was playing about 82 defensive snaps.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those numbers, like.
I think speed, I think what really skewed it late is when you switch systems like we did and really switch mentality. I mean, we moved things from we moved practice times, like from, mornings to afternoons to mornings, like workouts, like we flipped those. Like we had to change full class schedules. Like the way Brent came in and totally gave a facelift to the entire program. It's like with that, we didn't have the depth and we didn't have the experience to kind of quell that. So it's like, if you look at our first half numbers, we weren't on the field a ton and the pace was working. But in the second half, our linebackers are tired because they've been on the field forever, right? That's why if you watch so many Oklahoma games last year, it seems like it all came down to last possession and we just couldn't get off the field. We'd have a 3rd and 3 and couldn't get the stop. We'd have a 4th and 1 and couldn't get the stop. And it was we were making those stops in the first half, right? I mean, so when you get that, it's just you need the depth. You need the absolute depth. And I think speed should be used as a weapon. right? I mean, I think you should be able to know how to do it. I think running tempo with a run game is important. I'm not necessarily as I'm definitely in full agreement with you on if it's like like the air raid style, but add speed to it. I like running speed, but with a solid run game and getting to the ball. So with that, all comes down to depth. But I do think if there's a guy that can put a defense together that at least can have the depth and the talent and the experience to kind of get off the field no matter the snaps, it's Brent Venables. I mean, he's proven at times that he can have high flying offenses that were still able to have good defensive numbers.
I mean,
USC has that same formula with Lincoln Riley. I mean, they had an opportunity to be in the college football playoffs, and they ran into Utah and just kind of ran out of gas. Their quarterback gets hurt, but like you say, that style is sustainable, for an entire season.
That's why we were so validated, because here's the thing. No OU fans, at least no reasonable OU fans, think that Lincoln Riley is a bum. Like, think that he can't coach, that he's no good, blah, blah. We just know that he's got to win a specific way. And we spent all last offseason saying, I think we're going to be better long-term without Lincoln Riley, because you think about 2017, right? You think about that overtime classic. That was Lincoln Riley's first year as a head coach, right? So the next year, he's got Kyler Murray, right? High-flying offense, Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. We get beat by Bama by double digits. The next year, he's got Jalen Hurts, eventual NFL MVP candidate, and we get blown out by LSU. The next year, we've got Spencer Rattler's playing well. We don't make we win the Big 12, but we don't make the playoff. The next year, he's got a combination of Rattler and Williams, and they don't even make the Big 12 championship. So it's a direct line down when you just look at what the end result was to the season. A direct line downwards. And we saw that in Norman, and a lot of boosters saw that and didn't like that. They wanted to get back to more of the defensive style, kind of the adult in the room type stuff. And so when we say, hey, Lincoln Riley, we'd rather have somebody else, we're not saying Lincoln Riley's a bum, but we're saying we just don't think that style is sustainable to win a national championship. And that's why the 2 losses to Utah and the loss to Tulane, cool, they won a lot of games. That's fine, but they're empty calories. We know that team isn't going to threaten to win a national championship because we told you so. We told you he doesn't care about defense. We told you he's going to be reliant on his superstar quarterback, and if that goes wrong, then the whole team's going to go right in the crapper. Like, we told you all that, and we never argued that he was a crappy coach that wasn't going to win games at USC. Of course he's going to win games at USC with Caleb Williams, but we just would rather have something that's more sustainable and built from the ground up and from the inside out, as opposed to this, try and outscore everybody.
Tying that up, right? Like, I think you talk about building it from the inside out, right? And I think that's the formula to win in the SEC. Like, if you set yourself up in the trenches and then work yourself out, and then then predicate on stopping the run and running the ball, right? Like, it starts with running the ball on both sides, stopping it and running the ball effectively. And you look at what y'all have done recruiting wise, right? Jackson Arnold is your quarterback of the future. You look at Dalen Smothers as a good running back example. And you've built, and if I'm not mistaken, the 23 class was 4th overall, 24 composite, but a lot of defense, a lot of it. Now, I think a lot of that too is, stemming from the lack of attention that it got when Lincoln was there. So, looking overall, I thought this first year, while it was subpar, right, compared to typical Oklahoma standard, there's a lot of turnover and changing identity, right? Changing the entire culture for that matter. Changing the culture, the identity of the football team, on top of having to get guys in, defensive guys in. So far through one season with Venables there, you look at the 23 cycle. I mean, first off, it's 4th overall, and Kobe, Juan, y'all know this. You have to be top 5 in recruiting to make a difference in the SEC. You can get away with a top 5 class or a top 10 class for that matter in other conferences, but when you look at the SEC, you have to be top 5 to really have an impact. So it's a good first start, right? I think ultimately, Kobe, you about to say something?
Well, I think you're right, because I think you saw it this year. I mean, with TCU, if they'd have won, people were talking about they had the least, like, out of high school. I don't remember what the exact statistic is. Maybe one of y'all do, but like they had less blue chip players. They'd had the least amount of blue chip recruits to have ever won a national championship in like the past 25, 30 years. But it just, in a 15 game schedule, it catches up with you in an injury filled schedule, where you're losing some players. It catches up with you. It's why people get tired of hearing, Georgia fans especially, oh, if this one person doesn't get hurt, y'all don't win. It's like you recruit an 85-man roster on scholarship and another 40 that are walk-ons. I mean,
Yeah, depth building, no doubt. Like, that's what Oklahoma State ran into this year. They've been recruiting so poorly, and they need to develop well. A couple of offensive linemen get hurt, and they're shot for the entire season because they just don't have the quality depth, right?
I mean, so we're even seeing Clemson go through that. Their inability, or not inability, but like their unwillingness to use the portal. They have holes in roster spots, and they're an injury or two away from going, we're using a freshman on the line, or a freshman,
right.
former
well,
TCU
specifically, like, they run the field goal unit out, make the game winner against Baylor, right, in a game that they probably should have lost. They injured like 4 starting quarterbacks throughout the season, like targeting, like, concussion, this guy's out or whatever, right? Like, Dylan Gabriel was one of them, right? Like, there's a lot of, like, they were very opportunistic. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they were very opportunistic. They did go out and beat Michigan, so I can't take that playoff win away from them. But at the same time, I don't think anybody's expecting TCU to be a top 5 team to replicate that success. Like,
it'll be very difficult to do it if they even do.
Well, they can't be. I mean, Garrett Riley's gone. Max Duggan's gone. Quentin Johnston's gone. Like, Kendra Miller's gone. Like,
they're really turning.
And Art Briles didn't do anything. Art Briles didn't do anything at Arkansas that was that impressive. So
no,
I don't know.
They're literally,
it was a lightning in a bottle situation.
They're going to go through that NFL cleansing, and then you're going to turn around and look at your roster and go, we have nothing. We have nothing left that of any magnitude.
It reminds me of Cincinnati, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, that Cincinnati team that had Ritter and had, Sauce,
Kobe Bryant, Sauce Gardner. Yeah.
Like, all these, like, they had, 11 players drafted or something like that? Like, the most in Cincinnati history. Yeah, but the thing is, they just had, but they all weren't the same class, right? It was, okay, we need everything to fall into place. We've been trying to get this run going for a while. Boom. We're finally ready. And then one draft, and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're done. So TCU, like you said, is going to go through that one draft, and you don't have the depth to back it up. I mean, obviously, they've got some good transfers coming in, a couple from Alabama, including JoJo Earl getting back to Texas. So they're doing some nice things, but at the same time, it's like they have to be on that cycle of, like, okay, this is the time we've been waiting for. Everything has to come together. Just everything's got to fall our way perfectly roster-wise, and then boom, one NFL draft and they're done because they don't have the quality depth.
It's not easy. Let's wrap this thing up, guys. Any final words, shall we? Welcome
to the SEC, man. I'm just I'm excited to see what you guys are going to be able to do, and then how you guys are going to add to the appeal of the SEC, which is going to make everybody else mad.
And my final words is, I know we're talking about football, but I'm excited in so many other areas. I mean, Oklahoma is a powerhouse in softball. They're really good in baseball. They're phenomenal at women's gymnastics.
Basketball, they're good too.
Basketball, they're really good at basketball. I mean, there are just things that adding Texas and Oklahoma, like, I know that we get really caught up into, like, football, the big money maker. But I mean, like, you're adding 2 schools that do their whole athletics program well. Like, we always tease, like, what does Vandy do for the SEC? It's like, oh, well, Vandy plays baseball really well. They don't really do anything else.
Baseball program.
You know,
right. And I think that's
Oklahoma and Texas. Those are programs that, you know, are doing everything to a high standard.
Right. So I talked to Greg Sankey at the College World Series last year. And when you look at the College World Series last year, Oklahoma and Texas were obviously in Omaha. And when you add those two to the SEC and just look at that field alone, I mean, it's basically the SEC tournament, like at that point. Like you turn Omaha into the SEC tournament. So with that, you're right. I mean, the best going for a three-peat in softball, women's gymnastics, you know, decorated. Like we've got multiple sports that are ranked number one in the country right now in just the spring sports. So with that, you bring it over. Texas track and field is going to be big. Texas baseball is going to be big. Texas competes in a lot of those Olympic events that only like 4 schools in the entire country compete in. So they rack up a bunch of national titles and like diving and stuff like that. But you'll get like that stuff that now has the SEC logo on it, right? So with that, you're right. I mean, our men's golf teams, like Texas and Oklahoma's golf teams are incredible. Oh, you just won a tournament, I think yesterday that wrapped up. So with that, you're right. It's a complete athletic department proposition. Get caught up in the football you want, but I'm excited for some of those baseball series specifically because Omaha, man, that was a blast.
It's a complete overhaul from the Texas A&M Missouri acquisition where you brought them in, I felt, primarily for more of the football side of things, but neither of them do anything extremely well to my immediate, like, just thinking knowledge outside of that. I don't think either of them are unbelievable in baseball or softball. I don't think any of them are that great in soccer. You know, things like that I think of, like, you know, the acquisition of y'all is going to be, Oklahoma won a baseball or a softball national championship. And now that, like you're saying, that has an SEC logo stamped on it instead of a Big 12 logo stamped on it.
Right. I mean, you look at a place like Ole Miss. Like when I was in Omaha, it was funny. My co-host, and I know we're wrapping this up, but my co-host was in Norman in studio, and I was on remote in Omaha. So I'm sitting there in Rocco's, you know, the Jello shot challenge spot. I'm sitting there, and all these Ole Miss fans are in the bar with me. I got my speaker set up there for the remote, and he's like, man, of course there's a bunch of Ole Miss fans, man. It's just, you know, they've never won anything. They've never won a national championship. They've won women's golf once, and then Ole Miss, as an athletic department, had never won a national championship in anything else, right? And then obviously they have baseball now, but it's funny to me. It's like, you know, Ole Miss, people talk about as, hey man, it's a good football team. They've got good tradition. I think a lot of people actually like going to Oxford for games and whatnot. But then when you just look at the mass amount of success you're dumping on that conference, it's like it's a whole different animal. But
Greg Sankey wants domination in every sport, SEC dominance in every sport. And I think now you have a bona fide shot to make that happen. Ultimately,
I agree.
Yeah, so I see PG show. We'll wrap this up. I'm gonna read a couple comments and then we'll wrap this thing up. PG says OU softball's about to cruise to a third straight natty. I mean, Georgia softball's looking good so far, but I mean, I think the odds-on favorite is Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. He also says, watch out for Missouri on the recruiting trail in football. He's talking to some kids that really like what's going out there. I mean, you got the shoot mentality with Eli over there. Literally looks like my college professor, but neither here nor there.
If Eli can stick around, if he turns in another effort like he did last year, that staff might be fired. I mean, he's the closest thing to on the hot seat that the SEC has. So kids can be excited about what's going on out there.
Yeah, not even Clark Lee. I'm curious about Billy Napier. We'll see.
Yeah, but I think Napier's definitely one to watch for as well. I agree, especially if Florida State, you know, continues their rise. I think they gave Norvell a raise a little bit too early. He wasn't going anywhere, so they didn't need to pay him. But Missouri's staff is the closest thing to the hot seat that the SEC has right now. So, I mean, with OU now going to the SEC and Missouri not having that arguing point over them, and Missouri not really being, I mean, I know we just got PJ Atabare from there, 5-star defensive lineman. You got 4-star Caden Green, offensive tackle from there. But then you've got Williams Guarneri, but that's going to be a Missouri-Oklahoma battle. And then, sure, you've got Isaiah Mosey that's in the 2025 class, who'll be a 5-star wide receiver. But like Missouri can't just say, oh, we're going to get the local kids and we'll land a top 10 class. Like Missouri doesn't produce enough talent to put you in that upper echelon. So it's like, if the kids from Missouri are liking Missouri, good. That's kind of what they're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to like, but you have a handful of blue chip recruits every year. I mean, when you go to Florida, or Georgia or something like that, you have more 5-stars than Missouri might have 4-stars some years. I know not every year, but some years, right? So it's like it's just a different game, personally. Yeah, but to PG's point, Jay-Sean Rosh, 4-star edge, like it becomes, to my point, it becomes an issue when you can list in a short time or list one by one their blue chip players. That means there's not very many of them. So you can dominate an area, but that's going to give you a few blue chips per class. Like you need to spread your wings a little bit, and I think that's partly been what Missouri's been struggling with. And we'll see if that staff is still here a year from now.
Absolutely. Obviously, I'll wrap it up. Welcome to the SEC, kind of taking Juan's thunder there. Obviously, I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to be welcome additions here. I think it'll make the conference better, and ultimately, I'm okay with that. I want to see better competition. I think we're going to get that. Before we leave, though, where can folks follow you, man?
So follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Travis Skoll. That's in the banner there, Travis Skoll, originally from Minneapolis, big Vikings fan. That's why Skoll is in there. And then I can be found on typically Wednesdays, this week on Thursday and Friday on KREF, KREF. It's local radio, home of Sooner fans here in Oklahoma. But nationally, internationally, can download the app, KREF in the App Store. That's KREF. So yeah, radio, social media, get at me.
And y'all got it. You and JP have the JP and Trav show, and was that
Absolutely.
the Wednesday? Is that Tuesday?
Wednesday nights. It's either 9 p.m. or 9:30. And tonight we've got Sean Cooper coming on with us, who is the C4 owns C4. It's a big training facility on the Texoma border. Guys like Zadavian Sims and Bai Job and guys like that all come through that. Kevin Sperry, a big 2025 guy. And the quarterback, he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So we've got him on tonight. A lot of guests. A lot of fun, man.
Awesome. With that being said, let's wrap this thing up. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Wantilla the Hut is, Kobe the Swolders didn't make an appearance, but here we are. With that being said, have a great rest of your day. As always, hey, it was a pleasure having you on, Trav.
Appreciate you guys.
And with that being said, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.